Ray Lewis knows a thing or two about playing on successful Baltimore Ravens defenses, and he opened up about what this version of the Ravens defense needs to do to turn their season around. We dive into that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this bonus edition here on Saturday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And of course, thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We're 5 days a week here, plus more on Locked On Ravens with daily Ravens coverage. We have you covered here with all the Ravens coverage and content that you need. And we are here talking with another jam-packed episode and just diving into some headlines throughout the week and stuff that we weren't able to touch on. And here today, we're diving into a lot of it. We'll talk about Ray Lewis. He had some strong words for the Ravens defense and gave his opinion on what needs to change, what needs to happen for the Ravens defense this season to turn things around. In the second part of the show, we'll talk about an alarming report surfacing from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN about kind of the state of the organization and what's going on in their mindset right now and what that could mean. And then we'll finally dive into some injury report news for the Ravens. We got the final report on Friday yesterday, so dive into those updates as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Let's dive into it here. Ray Lewis, he spoke with Rick Ritter of WJZ, and if you want to go check out that full interview, there's an article on it on the CBS News website, and it's on YouTube, so be sure you check out the full interview on the WJZ YouTube page as well. But Ray Lewis was asked, Rick asked him a couple of times about this Ravens defense and kind of, what has to happen. And Ray Lewis had some interesting perspective on it. He said, quote, "A lot of talent, but great defenses are won. It's not about individuals. In the locker room, when we were winning championships, it was so quiet. It was peaceful. Why? Because we all understood it was one goal. How do we win? Not I. I think individually, these guys now have to get together. That's why me bringing them to my house, Ed bringing people to his house. We're all seeing it without the coaches. And I think this team has to get together and figure out how do we work together." He also went on to say the beautiful part about it is it's easily correctable, but it has to be an intentional process of getting it fixed. Some leader has to say, come to the house without coach. Let's look at this film. And this is really interesting here because, again, we know that Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, they all, that defense, the defenses that won championships for this organization, there were a lot of player leaders on that defense. And I think it's interesting that Lewis kind of had these comments because right now the Ravens defense, not that they don't have leaders, but it just feels like they feel lost almost. I'm trying to find the words. They feel lost right now. And so, whether it be Roquan Smith, who is out right now, or Kyle Hamilton, who, is trying to take on a bigger leadership role, Marlon Humphrey, who's trying to do the same thing. It just feels like they need that sense of direction. It feels like, again, this defense is just kind of like a rudderless ship right now, and they're just floating with no land in sight. There needs to be some sense of direction. And, we hear about players-only meetings, and, the Ravens have players-only meetings and how they can be successful, how players can kind of air their grievances and do it in a respectful way. And, it's honest, it's passionate, when you talk about some of the stuff you hear about players' meetings. But I think that overall, I'm not saying every players' meeting is successful and all, it's 100% success rate, but I think generally it's a good thing to do so that you can kind of get that player perspective without the coaches being there. And it's not like, again, I don't think Ray Lewis is necessarily saying like, oh, don't listen to the coaches. Don't do that. That's not what Ray Lewis is saying here. It's just about, taking that extra step and making sure that you're covering all of your bases, because right now, it's not good. It is historically bad. And so I think you do need to be taking every step possible to go out there and make make yourself better, make your teammates better, make everybody better. And Rick asked Ray Lewis, is that leader in this locker room the guy that's going to step up and say, hey, come to the house without coach. Let's go watch this. Let's go figure this out. And Ray said, quote, that's the problem sometimes. You have more than one. So you ask yourself, who is that voice? Who's that voice of reason? The greatest ability of the most dominant defense is communication. Talent is the last thing we're worried about. Now it's chemistry. How can we flow? How can we walk in lead? Too many individual mistakes. And when you correct that, I'm always riding with us. That was what Lewis said there. So, and that's big, right? And I agree with Ray. Like, you have to be able to communicate, obviously on-field communication, which in itself is struggling. I mean, we all can acknowledge that, where there are miscommunications and guys clearly aren't on the same page. But it's off the field as well, communicating and kind of building camaraderie off the field, being able to trust. And I'm not saying the Ravens defense doesn't necessarily trust each other, but I just think that there's a little bit of disconnect in terms of like, hey, I'm doing this, so you need to trust me. And then the other defenders is kind of like, oh, well, no, I need to do this. And then, it results in blown coverages or other miscommunications that spiral. And then, because we've heard a lot of defenders this week, Mike Green and others, and Nate Wiggins has had this message. Other people have too. The Ravens defense, Ravens defenders, Ravens coaches feel like this unit is close. And, there's other perspective. I mean, Sean Merriman, he was on the Ryan Ripken show, and he talked a lot about how, for a defense, sometimes it truly is just like one guy doesn't do his job or one guy misses something, and the result of that is catastrophic. Whereas 9 or 10 players do their job, but it's 1 or 2 players that doesn't, and the whole defense suffers for that. And so that's what we've kind of heard from the player perspective. I'm curious to see how it looks against Los Angeles on Sunday. It's a very high-powered offense with a lot of high-powered talent. So you'd have to hope. But, I think that there has to be someone who takes the reins here, like Ray said, and be that leader. And again, it can be multiple people. Like Ray Lewis was, that de facto leader on those defenses. But like he was alluding to with guys like Ed Reed, talked about Rod Woodson a little bit. Like those are also, whether it's veterans or even younger guys that are taking on those leadership roles. I think that's really, really important because, it's someone that you can rally around. And I know that Roquan Smith is kind of like that, middle of the huddle, rah-rah guy there. But, it's also about leading by example. And I'm not saying Roquan doesn't do it, but I'm just saying that there are other guys that I think need to also step up to that plate, or at least step up more. Not that guys aren't trying, they certainly are, but it seems like the question now from Ray Lewis is, hey, who is that voice? Who are those voices that are going to step up? Because again, like if I want advice about, how do we turn the defense around? What is it? Well, I'm going to go and ask Ray Lewis about it because he led some of the most dominant defenses that this game has ever seen. So yeah, I'm going to listen to Ray Lewis. Yeah, I'm going to go try to get his advice. And yeah, I'm going to try to take what he says to heart. So, whether it's players only meetings or film sessions or whatnot. And again, it's not replacing that. It's not going into meetings saying, I'm not going to do this and then going players and okay, I'm only going to listen to what the players say. It's about doing that on top of it. Hey, coach said this thing that was really good and really like, I like that, but let's dive into a little deeper and see, hey, wait, I didn't see this when we were talking to coach. Now you can bring that back to the table in the next meeting to the coaches and say, hey, we saw this. Well, let's talk about it. It's a constant chain of communication, coach to coach, player to coach, player to player. Like everything has to be meshing and flowing. And right now, clearly, it's just not for this Baltimore Ravens defense. So there are a lot of different things they have to work on. It obviously all has to translate to the field, but it's not just like, you go into meetings, you step on the field on Sunday and boom, it is what it is. There's a lot of preparation that goes into it. We know that. I mean, this Ravens team is consistently prepping for games. All teams around the league do, but you have to be able to communicate. And essentially that's what Ray is saying here, because talent-wise, they have talent on the field defensively. I mean, especially when they're fully healthy. Obviously, injuries have played a factor. And again, I use that as context, right? It's context to what happens, but you have talent. That's something we were talking about really all offseason was, oh, look, the depth is there. They can withstand a couple guys going down. And again, not necessarily the level they're sustaining right now. That Texans game was crazy. How many stars they lost on defense, but you got to be able to communicate. It gets harder the further you go down on the depth chart, because again, it's just whether it's inexperience or guys not being in those roles with this Ravens team and this Ravens system, it all sometimes gets lost in translation. But, at this point, you have to be able to take it from a team perspective, like Ray said, because sometimes it feels like guys right now are pressing to make that big play. We've heard as such from guys like Marlon, Humphrey, and others, where it's like, everyone's trying to make that one play, that splash play to turn the defense around. When in reality, like Ray says here, it's not about individuals, when they're winning championships, because they all understood that it was one goal. They have to be united on that front. I'm not saying they're not clear they want to win a Super Bowl, but they all have to be on the same page, and communication is the number one key to be able to get that down. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about a little bit the communication that's been communicated about the Ravens. We'll talk about a report from Jeremy Fowler on what the team thought going into that Houston game in week number 5 and why it's a little bit alarming, but something they can bounce back from if they can get back on track against the Rams. So stay tuned. A lot coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The Part Finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. And the Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this bonus edition Saturday episode. Again, appreciate everybody for being here today and giving some time on your weekend to listen to Locked On Ravens and the latest Ravens happenings. We're 5 days a week plus more here on Locked On Ravens. So our regular show, Monday through Friday, that comes out at 6 a.m. Eastern time every single weekday. Plus, again, these bonus episodes on the weekend when there are headlines. And of course, we're having a lot of headlines during the season, so we're doing a lot of bonus episodes. But we also have during game days, we got game day episodes right in the morning before the games. And then, of course, we have the Locked On Ravens watch-alongs during the games. We have the instant reaction shows after games, and we do those after pieces of big news as well. And we do the Locked On Ravens squad show twice per week. It's Wednesdays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, and directly after games as well, the instant reaction show, the game day process. It goes morning, pregame show, then we got the watch along, then we got the instant reaction, then we got the squad show. So we got so much content for you here on Locked On Ravens. Tell a friend, tell the family member, we have them covered, much like we have you covered on Locked On Ravens. Now, there was an alarming report from Jeremy Fowler about kind of what's going on right now within the Ravens organization. It was informative, but it's interesting. So Jeremy Fowler was on the Rich Eisen show, and he talked about how the panic meter in Baltimore is rising a little bit. He said that, and he said, quote, they felt like that was going to be the get-right game for them, referring to the Texans game. They were legitimately shocked with what happened despite Lamar Jackson being out. They felt like they were going to get back to team complementary ball, playing like a Raven, playing with an edge. They thought they could help Cooper Rush by running the ball with Derrick Henry. And Jeremy Fowler said, I do think there's a shock in the building that has to wear off quickly. Jeremy Fowler saying that, and also saying they were kind of hoping that Lamar being gone was a chance for them to galvanize themselves and play a complete game. So again, I have no problem with them thinking that it was going to be a get-right game, because I think that's how you have to think, right? If you go into a game and you're a professional, or if you're any sports team going into a game thinking you can't win, well, let me tell you, you're not going to win. Like, you have to have confidence regardless of how bad things look or how banged up you are. That mindset is fine to me. Like, that's the right mindset to have. Hey, we're going to go in there. Yeah, we're banged up. Yeah, we don't have this guy, but we're still going to win. Right? That's the exact mindset that you should have. That's not the alarming part. The alarming part is Jeremy Fowler saying the panic meter is rising a little bit, and him saying that he thinks there's a shock in the building that has to wear off quickly, Because again, I think everyone in that organization right now is floored with what has happened so far this year. I mean, it just is. And Rashod Bateman, he took accountability here. And I thought Rashod Bateman, he did a really good job of kind of encapsulating how the organization is feeling, but while also, using his platform or using his words to say, look, the fan base has a right to feel how they feel right now. And I thought that it was really honest of him. He said, quote, all of this is kind of shocking to me personally, even to the organization, not just myself. The fans got every right to feel how they feel. They expect excellence, and it's our job to deliver that. And we're not upholding the standard right now. We deserve all the criticism. We'll take it. We'll handle it, but we just gotta fix it. And this to me is the perfect response, right? This to me from Rashod Bateman, I loved this. I loved this from Rashod Bateman because I think, again, it's saying, yes, look, we know we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We know that it's not what we all expected this season. And he's not saying, well, it is what it is, and we just kind of have to go do what we know we can do. That message is in there, but it's not the only message, right? I think that when a player comes out and says, look, we understand how the fan base is feeling. We deserve the criticism that we're getting. We know how the fans are feeling, and he clearly understands it. This to me was a perfect response. And it's showing that, hey, we know that we have to get on the right track. It's shocking, but we also understand that this is not the product that we want to put forward and that fans wanted to see. So now we understand that, yeah, there's going to be criticism for it. I can't, say enough good things about Rashod Bateman's response here, because I think that this should be the messaging from everyone. We've talked about John Harbaugh, and I think that Harbaugh's been better recently in his availabilities. It got not hostile, but he was clearly on edge in some of his interviews over the last handful of weeks. I think he's been better about that this week in particular, even though, it's still coach speak answers, which I expect at this point. And, it just is what it is there. The Ravens don't want to give away advantages. That's something that I think everybody just has to kind of accept the Ravens are going to do. I think that, the accountability aspect is something that a lot of people ask about from John Harbaugh about, hey, you know what? I didn't do my job good enough for this, that, and the other. And, man, this is kind of the narrative. I just know, like, in the fan base, right? There are people who are just like, man, John Harbaugh's answers right now are not doing it. It's the same old stuff every single week. Oh, they lose the game 44-10. And John Harbaugh goes up to that podium and says, we just got to be better next week. We just got to go out there and right the wrongs and do the things better. Where in reality, I think that the answer that everybody wants to hear is, this was unacceptable. And, it starts with me, and we need to do our job better than that. Bateman took accountability for the fact that he just thought the ball was thrown away by Cooper Rush on that interception. He stopped on that route. John Harbaugh talked about that and, nodded in disappointment when, the reporter said that he thought Bateman stopped on that route. Bateman apologized for that and took accountability for it and said, oh, I thought the ball was out of bounds and thrown away. And he looked up for the ball and it wasn't there. He threw it away. So he said he apologized what it looked like. He ended up making it clear, hey, I didn't give up on the ball. This is what happened, but it's still not okay. So that's the type of messaging here. And, kind of going back to Jeremy Fowler's report, that's the type of mindset that I think can help everybody in that locker room. It's like, hey, we're not doing our jobs correctly. We're not doing them well. We're losing games like we're losing them. But, we all have to take accountability. I think that should be the messaging in the locker room right now. I don't know if it is or not, right? I'm not in that locker room. I can't tell you what's being said or what's not being said in that locker room. But what I do know is that if they want to turn this season around, they're going to have to do it quickly and with mentalities like Rashod Bateman to kind of, again, not be in full pick. Because, again, you can tell with Bateman's like demeanor and how he was talking, it's like, he's not in panic mode right now. He's someone that understands the job has to be done and it has to be done better. But, if the team is pressing and the team is panicking, that's the most alarming thing, where it truly is a week-to-week league. And, this week is huge for the Ravens. It's a massive opportunity. You can either start to turn your season around a little bit, or you can go to 1-5 and be in a really bad spot. And they're going to have to do that without a couple of key playmakers. So coming up in the final part of the show, we will dive into who is in, who is out, who could play, who could not play for this Baltimore Ravens team in week number 6 with the final injury report, plus some other news and notes. So stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now, I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. And for the Ravens, they need a big win against the Rams in week number 6. They cannot drop to 1-5. And over on FanDuel, the Ravens, well, they are currently 7-point home underdogs. So maybe you like the Rams as the road favorite. Maybe you like the Ravens as the home underdog. Either way, you've got to get over to FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. We return here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still diving into Ravens content and coverage here on this bonus edition of the show on Saturday. We dove into Ray Lewis and his comments. We dove into Rashod Bateman taking accountability and Jeremy Fowler's report. And we also now are going to have to talk about this Ravens injury report here because it is a long one. It is definitely a CVS receipt. And, still, though, there is some good news. Of course, there also is some bad news. So it's the question. Do you want the good news or the bad news first? Now, I know some people prefer the good news first. Some people prefer the bad news first. We'll go with the good news first here. We'll start off with some positivity. So there are a couple of people here who just aren't listed on the injury report at all anymore, at least don't have a game status. So Ben Cleveland, he returned to practice on Friday in full. He does not have a game status for this one. Zay Flowers, he's going to be questionable. He's the only questionable player, so he was limited for all 3 days of practice. I guess we'll just have to wait and see with Zay. But Kyle Hamilton, Marlon, Humphrey, Joseph Noteboom, as well as Roger Rosengarten and Ronnie Stanley, all of those players have no injury designation for this game. Marlon is a little bit of a surprise. I thought that Marlon would maybe miss more time, but Marlon, apparently, if everything goes well pregame, going to be back out there. And again, this doesn't mean that they're going to be active. Again, they could have a couple other things happen, but really, really, really good sign that those guys are all no game injury designation for Sunday. Now the bad news. You have a couple of guys ruled out. Obviously, the big one being Lamar Jackson. The Ravens will have to navigate this with Cooper Rush again for the second straight week. Alongside Lamar, joining him on the out list is Chidobe Awuzie, Emory Jones, as well as Patrick Ricard, Roquan Smith, and Tez Walker. Tez actually got downgraded, limited, and then yesterday he was a DNP. So that's something to monitor with his oblique. Emory Jones, I think he's getting close. Ricard, he's getting close again. A lot of these guys will most likely be back after the bye, especially as they get a full ramp-up period. I mean, it was very unlikely Ricard was going to play in this game after returning to practice on Thursday, right? He needs time to ramp up. Same thing with Emory Jones, and he needs to get up to speed on everything because he's a rookie. So I expect a lot of these guys back after the bye. You get that week 7 bye. Honestly, it came at the perfect time. At least it will, because even if you do lose this game, you will hopefully, if you're the Ravens, be back at close to full strength here as you try to kind of rack up a lot of wins against teams. The Ravens have the 8th easiest strength of schedule remaining. So that's something that they can hang their hat on. And if they do lose this week, which is possible, they can win, they can lose. We don't know. They're going to have to start winning games and winning a lot of them after the bye week. So, the injury situation in Baltimore obviously is not great. Defensively, it's obviously not great either, especially when you talk about the stats right now, defensive aim. And again, it kind of ties back into what we talked about with Ray Lewis in the first part of the show, where, you're not going to get anywhere without communication. That's where it starts. That's where Ray Lewis led defenses, won championships with. It's not about and Ray wasn't really talking about players versus coaches. It's just about getting different perspective, player talking to player talking to coach talking to coach, all of that combined, you're a team, right? All that perspective helps the team. So you got to be a team here. Ravens defense after week 5, 29th in rushing yards allowed, 30th in rushing touchdowns allowed, 31st in passing yards allowed, 31st in total yards allowed, 32nd in passing touchdowns allowed, 32nd in first downs allowed, 32nd in points allowed. They're a bad third down defense. They're a bad red zone defense. They're a bad fourth down defense. They just can't do anything right now. They can't sack the quarterback. They can't force turnovers. Everything is bad. Now, getting back some of your stars, that will help. You also, get some safety help in that will hopefully help the back end and can help move Kyle Hamilton around. And so we had Sam Njoku on the show yesterday, and he gave his perspective on what's going on with the Ravens defense, specifically in the secondary. So I want to play what Sam had to say, and then we'll talk about it. What's your biggest thing that the Ravens have to fix in the secondary specifically? And that can even just be getting healthy. But I do think while that is one of the things that has to happen, there are a couple of others as well that I think they need to figure out.
I mean, the philosophy from top to bottom is just it's really weird when I'm watching the film. And I took a dive at watching what happened in that Texans game. There was a real focal point here where I just say the play calling is not there. The way the DBs are playing the opposing receivers is strange because they're playing in such a way where they should know that their teammate has their back in certain situations and play leverage a certain way, and they're not doing it. They're playing as if there's one-on-one coverage, no safety help up top, or if they are playing help, the safety's not there coming in. So that's communication. It's not really, hey, this guy's just beating me one-on-one every time. It's nothing like that. It's just they're playing the game weird.
Yeah, there's just a lot that needs to be fixed on this Ravens defense right now. Talking about Lamar Jackson, for example, if he comes back after the bye week and starts putting up 30, 40 points on defenses again, well, you still have to trot your defense out there if you're the Ravens. And so it might not matter what Lamar does if the defense can't stop giving up points, as we've seen a couple of times already this season. And one more thing from Jeremy Fowler's report is that the Ravens, the 177 points they've given up in the first 5 weeks of the season is the worst in a 5-game stretch in Ravens history. So you're already breaking records. You don't want to break more records. This defense needs to figure it out and figure it out fast. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. Of course, we'll be back here tomorrow with our pregame episode in the morning, and then we'll have the watch along during the game, the instant reaction after the game, and then the Locked On Ravens squad show after that. So be sure to stay tuned for all we have coming up, and I will see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.